Hello, welcome to Sky Sweaty Record Review, episode 80, the only new music review show hosted by a French professor immediately after getting out of the YMCA. And today I'm going to be reviewing an album by Lil Pump, an album called Harverd Dropout. That's Harvard spelled with an E, somehow. And, you know, in a lot of ways, I think you could take this album as the nadir of Western civilization. That's an easy take. If you don't know what nadir means, and I assume he probably doesn't, seeing as he dropped out of Harvard, it means the low point. So it's the opposite of the apex. It's the nadir, the absolute low point. How could you say that this album is a nadir? I mean, this album is such an amazing ode to stupidity. This guy talks about being so stupid, he makes Takeshi 6ix9ine look like Radiohead, okay? He talks about not eating and being addicted to drugs. Talks about giving your daughter cocaine. All of the songs have constant repetition, just never-ending, mind-numbing repetition. All he raps about is sex, doing drugs, rarely even selling drugs, which is slightly more interesting, I guess, and having money and designer brands. That's it. Like, almost every song has 3 notes. None of them have a B section or a C section. No complexity whatsoever. There's a track with Lil Wayne in which he gets out-rapped on his own single. Like, you hear Lil Wayne talking about how everyone, the song's called Be Like Me. And Lil Pump is like, everyone wants to be like me. But he's just trying to be like Lil Wayne. So Lil Wayne comes on, it's like, everyone's trying to be like me. But he's talking about you, chump. He thinks that you are trying to be like him. And he is so much better than you. Oh my God, you're the worst. Okay, that's what some people could say. But I'm here to propose a different perspective on Lil Pump, on Harverd Dropout. Now, if you want to watch a good review actually on this album, I suggest listening to the Needle Drops review. It's really quite good, or watching it. He's the #1 video reviewer for a reason. It's really good. It's funny because he thinks it's too smart. Like, he thinks that what makes Lil Pump good was his first album was even stupider. I don't know. Could be right. I disagree with him, though. I think the best song on this album is a track called Stripper Name. It's kind of funny, sort of Eazy-E style vocals, kind of a weird vocal, like, backdrop. Anyways, not important. So let's go from the idea that Lil Pump, that this guy right here, that this guy is not the nadir of civilization. Okay? Let's compare him to Johann Sebastian Bach. You see, I also listen to classical music, or as it's more properly called, Western art music, or Wham, but don't call it Wham. They hate it when you call it Wham. If you don't know much about Bach, he's basically the first major composer, the one who would go on to inspire many others. He's basically the master of polyphony, which is where you have more than one thing going at the same time, more than one voice. So, like, you'll have one thing going do-do-do, and then something else being like do-do-do-do-do-do-do, and then doing those both at the same time. Highly complicated music. Music is never as complicated as it is with Bach. And, well, people keep recording Bach music. So I went and I found an album that's been released within the last month, okay? This is it's made by John Elliott Gardiner, and it's called the Motets and Cantatas of Bach. So I thought, let's compare these two things, okay? And I'm going to make the argument that Lil Pump is better than Bach, according to 11 criteria. I did a lot of production on this episode. Impact in life, achieving aims, clarity, ambition, originality, legacy, melody, rhythm, lyrics, positivity, and complexity. So, first of all, let's just get this out of the way. You should listen to Gardiner's rendition of these motets. It's beautiful. It's heartbreakingly beautiful. It's really well produced. It's nice in stereo, so it was basically divided into 2 different groups of singers, and they're in each ear. And it's in 3 movements, and the second movement is the slow movement, and it just makes you weep with beauty. Bach actually used to get in trouble because the church elders where he worked didn't want him inspiring too much emotion, and he constantly failed at that. It's absolutely beautiful. If you don't know what motet means, I didn't. It just means a piece of music in several parts with words. So there's very little instrumentation. It's mostly voices singing. So how can I possibly say that that is not as good as Lil Pump? Well, let's talk a little bit about Let's compare two different pieces, okay? We're going to be comparing Signet dem Herrn ein neues Lied. Sing unto the Lord a new song. This is one of the motets on the album. I'm going to be comparing that with the song Dropout by Lil Pump. Let's first of all take the question of impact in life. Here's an interesting point. More people have listened to Lil Pump today than ever heard Bach in his entire lifetime. I'll just let you chew on that. Bach wasn't particularly successful in his time. He did not get the respect that he deserved up until really the 19th century. He made this piece in 1727, so, 100 years after is really when he he became so influential. So arguably, you could say that even though Bach is the founder of so much modern sense of counterpoint and development of composition and inspired so many to do so much in his lifetime, Lil Pump has had more influence. How about achieving aims? Well, Bach wanted to be able to make music the way that he wanted to. But he was constantly underneath the thumb of all these church elders and all these great men in these towns who would tell him what to do and what not to do. Lil Pump wants to make money. He wants to have designer shirts and he wants to do drugs. Who's succeeding here? At least for the time being, Lil Pump is achieving his aims. Bach would be constantly frustrated and put down by the people who should have been supporting him. It's actually a funny story. The Brandenburg Concerto, like some of the most famous music ever composed, was like a demo reel that Bach gave to some rich dude, Brandenburg. And the rich dude just took these pieces of music, some of the most blindingly beautiful pieces of music, put them in his pocket, and never did anything with them. Meanwhile, on the song Dropout, Lil Pump points out this. I'm still a free agent. I just left the label. The CEO do what I say so. If not, I'ma cut his payroll. So he's actually free of the constraints of the artist, of having to be underneath the weight of someone else. He is free to make his music because he can make it as he wishes. Next on the list. So that's 2 points for Lil Pump, 0 for Bach. Clarity. Listen, Bach, this piece of music is beautiful, but it's all over the place, man. You have voices over here, voices over there, things restart. You're in 3 different pieces, 3 different sections of this whole song. I mean, really. Interesting, I watched an interview with John Elliott Gardiner, the guy who produced this, who conducted this, and he described this motet as airplanes flying over each other, miles over each other. And that's how it is. Like you hear one thing going, ha, 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 and then down here like, ha, 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 and then up here, ha, ha, ha. It's just no clarity whatsoever. Okay, there's some clarity, but it's very complex. You compare that with Lil Pump. I mean, it's just completely clear, totally simple. Matter of fact, there's one part to the song, and I believe it is automated. I think someone just pressed a button, and the music goes up. Here, I'll play a little bit of that Lil Pump for you, so you hear it. Very clear what he's saying, Just bum 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 bum. There's no counterpoint. There's no development. So, for clarity, 1 more point for Lil Pump. Ambition. Lil Pump wants to rule the world and be the most powerful person. Bach was just trying to feed his 7,000 kids. It's actually not clear why he made this beautiful work, which again, if you haven't heard it, you should take a listen to it. It might have been for a funeral, it might not have been. He might have actually just made it because he was a teacher, teaching his students how to sing. This might have just been basically a training exercise for his school because he was the master of the course and he would teach kids music. I think it's called a Thomasmeister, something like that. It's funny, there's actually a good comparison you could draw between Lil Pump and Bach. They both had problems with schooling. Now, Lil Pump didn't actually go to Harvard. He dropped out in 10th grade, which he mentioned several times on this album. Actually, even on this song as well. Dropped out, then I got rich. But Bach also had problems. He was expected to teach Latin to his students. And he just didn't do it. He just got someone else. He paid someone else to teach them Latin because all he was interested in was music. You know? He wasn't interested in education as much as he was in music. You could say there's a similarity there. So I would say Bach did not quite reach his ambition of being free of these kinds of constant restraints. Originality. I'm calling originality a tie, okay? Let me tell you why. Because Bach is developing on the motet, which was developed throughout the Renaissance, from the 13th century on. Lil Pump is making music from the 20th century. You know, it's only like 40 years old. You know, Bach is just developing these things that already existed for a long time. Sure, he perfected it. Sure, he pushed it in a new direction. Sure, you could spend your entire lifetime trying to understand what he did and never actually even arrive at the end of it. But still, he was building on someone else. So that's a tie. Legacy. Well, this is also a tie because we don't know what Lil Pump's legacy is. We don't know if in the future he'll be looked upon. This actual piece, Signet der Herren ein neues Lied, excuse me for bad German once again, that's 2 episodes in a row. Mozart heard this piece. I mean, Mozart was alive after Bach died, you know, but he heard it like 70 years later in Leipzig, where Bach composed it, where Bach was basically just like a music teacher. He heard this piece and was so moved, he demanded a copy of the manuscript. He wrote all over it, talked about how it should be instrumented, and arguably this formed the basis of Mozart's Requiem. If it weren't for this little piece of music that I'm encouraging you to listen to, Signet der Herren, just look up Singet, S-I-N-G-E-T, okay? Singet Bach, and then find this piece of music. If it weren't for this, we wouldn't have the Requiem, which is up there with one of the most recognizable pieces in the modern canon. But we don't know. Maybe there's a new Mozart coming out who's going to hear Dropout. Dropped out, then I got rich. Yeah. Dropped out, then I put a patek, meaning a watch, on my wrist. Ooh. Dropped out from my teacher because she ain't S-word. Dropped out, spent $500,000 on my whip. Maybe he'll have that kind of legacy. Melody. Melody, I'm going to have to give this one to Bach. This is his first point. It's amazing the amount of different notes and melodies that's going together, how these things all play. Interestingly, on the last part of this piece, there's 3 parts. So it's kind of like a medium part, a slow part, and then the last bit is really kind of upbeat. And you get to hear kind of these nice catchy melodies. I guess they're called subjects at this point, if you're following. He goes to this whole thing of a fugue. You may want to look up a fugue, by the way. You know, where you have one thing called a subject, which is basically a melody line, and it plays. And then a different voice will do it in a different register at a different time, and then a different voice at a different time. And you have 3 or 4 different things going on at the same time, but they're all doing the same thing, but they're all doing it different ways. And there's other added points in there, and it all comes together. And you sit there and you despair that you will never understand Bach at all, because he's so goddamn smart. It's like calculus with music. And yet, still somehow, it's melody that can move you. Let's hear it. Even though that melody is fairly confusing to parse out because it's in that kind of weird fugue form, I still give him the nod over Lil Pump. Rhythm, I'm going to call it a tie again. The rhythm in Bach is not regular. You can't dance to it. I was at the gym and I could whereas Dropout, I mean, it's just a very simple, straightforward rhythm. So in that song where he's talking about the lunch lady at school giving him soda with codeine in it, man, this guy loves codeine. Whew! If you want to hear some good advertising for abusing codeine, check out Lil Pump. Man, he loves it. But you hear it's got rhythm, it's got a drum beat. I'm gonna call that even, because I like rhythm. I like songs you can dance to. I think that has value. Then lyrics. Oh, I'm definitely giving that to Lil Pump. Let me tell you why. Lil Pump wrote his lyrics. Bach didn't even write his lyrics. He's just copying some psalm. Maybe he's trying to reach up with God. Maybe he's making this as some kind of attempt to reach God through his music. Some would argue that. Or he's working for the church and he's trying to make lyrics that he knows people will like. So he just takes a song. So even though we have Lil Pump saying things like, "Teacher mad at me 'cause she know I was right." Yeah. "I've been popping pills, sipping drank all night." At least those are his lyrics. And moreover, if we get to the next thing, positivity, of course, Bach must be more positive. I mean, he's singing about God. I mean, if we listen to the beginning of the psalm that he quotes, "Praise ye the Lord, sing unto the Lord a new song, in his praise in the congregation of saints. Let Israel rejoice in him that made him, let the children of Zion be joyful for their king." Sure, that's a lot more positive than I used to hotbox, meaning smoke marijuana, in the bathroom at school. Get high every day, number one rule. Okay, that's not very positive. But let's go further in this psalm. "Let the high praises of God be in their mouth, and a two-edged sword in their hand, to execute vengeance upon the heathen and punishment upon the people, to bind their kings with chains and their nobles with fetters of iron, to execute upon them the judgment written. This honor have all saints. Praise ye the Lord." I don't know. I don't want religious war. I'm sure the rest of it's great. And if you don't speak German, you don't know what he's saying. But I would rather have someone talk about drinking cough syrup in school than talk about murdering people in the name of God. So I'm also giving that point to Lil Pump. Lil Pump. I keep calling him Lil Pump. And finally, complexity. Well, Bach wins that one as well. So let's count up the points then. For Lil Pump, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 for Lil Pump, 2 for Bach, and 2 ties. So that is how I could make the argument that Lil Pump is, in fact, better than Johann Sebastian Bach. I really suggest you try this experiment. Listen to the song Dropout. Immediately listen to Sing It, Singet, by Bach. And then listen to Dropout again. It's fun. It's weird. It's very jarring to imagine these things. Okay? How can some Colombian American 19-year-old who represents everything that appears to be wrong in our civilization, who appeared through SoundCloud, like just some online place where you could upload music for free. Someone who had nothing, who came from nothing, who appears to represent nothing. Listen to that kind of crazy psychotic music, and then listen to Bach, some of the most complex, well-developed, well-thought-out, structured music of all time. Christoph Wolff, by the way, is the primary Bach scholar at Harvard. And I like to imagine that Harvard Dropout is real, and that Lil Pump was actually a musical genius. And he went to Harvard as a 13-year-old. And he met Christoph Wolff and took a class on Bach. And while he was there, Christoph Wolff said, "You're too good for this. You're too smart for this. You need to make music. I need you to go and think, what can you do to make the most important, impactful music?" And Lil Pump thought about it and decided SoundCloud rapping was the way. And this is the first stage of his master plan. Face tattoos, all this, rapping about codeine and cocaine and cars and Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang. But the next phase is going to unleash upon the world shall be the most earth-shattering change to music and Western civilization in hundreds of years. I don't know. It's not likely, but it's a fun thing to think about. So, until then, I say to you, have fun listening to Bach. Listen to the new edition by John Elliott Gardiner. It really is spectacular. Listen to Dropout by Lil Pump. It's not a bad album if you like really stupid music about codeine. Until next time, there's the camera.